Thank you. At this point, we'd like to open up to anyone that has joined us here today that would like to share some memories as we celebrate the morning. So, feel free.
Hi, I'm Naomi, one of Jim's daughters, and I'll sort of take over sort of where I guess Kathy left off in certain ways. When we first met Jim, Miriam and I, Mom reminds me of some time that he got arrested for, or actually got a ticket for not bringing enough life preservers into the sailboat at Lake Lemon, and was very embarrassing for him, but it went right over, I think Miriam was in my head, as to what was going on then. He had an ancient, what's now known as a Nissan, and it was originally red, we think, but we're not sure. And people used to comment in Bloomington, Indiana, about how my mom robbed a cradle when she married him. So she did. Yes, she did. And speaking of marrying, we have some lovely pictures, which I don't know whether they're included in this particular presentation afterwards, of Miriam, me, and my mom, all in maxi dresses, which those of you remember, that's those ones that, yes, with the, you know, and Jim with his hair looking like the program, and going off for our wedding dinner. When we moved to New York, some of my fondest memories are Jim apparently interrupted one of our cats who was trying to use the litter box but not getting quite into the litter box to use it. And then promptly the cat went upstairs and peed on Jim's pillow. Jim suffered through some very, very long commutes when we all lived in New York. Some of them to New Jersey, and he worked hard to help our family adjust to New York. He built his own computer back in the first days of personal computers. And my mom tells me that she actually did some for a dissertation on that. He tried to help us with math homework, but sometimes our teachers were wrong about the way that they explained the math to us. And he had to deal with a lot with two young girls. Miriam went through what we call the Madonna stage, and I went through, and still do sometimes, take very long time to do my daily personal routines in the bathroom. So we had to have enough bathrooms wherever we lived so that everybody could live together. For a while we had a student of my mom's, Annie, who lived with us, and I'm sorry she isn't here to partake in this because she really is a part of the family also. But we would have dinners together, and somebody would start into discussion of something disgusting. And then that would go on to Annie and Jim going back and forth to the ultimate ick, which is just taking that disgusting thing and elaborating on it, how it could become more disgusting. Yes. So the other thing I remember about the dinner table, and those of you who have ever dined with Jim, is that Jim had a hollow leg and he could pretty much eat anybody else under the table, despite his rather thin demeanor. He also loved sailing, and that some of that discussion of Kathy's about being at the shore. He loved sailing, but at one time when I was, I think, in high school or college, he had one of those little sunfish. I went out, decided I couldn't sail back in, and started to pull it back in, but by then my mom's great aunt, who was like her mom, and Jim were both panicking, making everybody crazy that I wasn't going to get back in, but I did. As you can see. He loved to break into Gilbert and Sullivan tunes, much to the dismay of my sister and me, as my mom would also break into classic tunes. And now we do for our children. Yes. When they went to Ann Arbor and San Diego, first of all, when he came to, those of you who are still here who were in his professional life, know what I'm talking about when I was amazed to hear that the building that he was working in was originally a couples spa. It was apparently a sex therapy center. So that really intrigued me. I thought, how did it jump from that to that? Apparently that was conducive. He also kept up his love of water with a yacht club at Portage Lake. And he suffered through my mom and me picking a puppy up in the square in Bloomington, Indiana, and bringing it back. I know he really, really loved dogs from his childhood, but this was a nutty dog. And but he loved him nonetheless. And he loved the water, so when they were in California, again, they had a place on the water. And he stayed with my mom in San Diego and commuted back and forth for quite a while, which I think was really a lot of devotion to both the job and my mom. So, bad puns, bad puzzles, dancing of all sorts, wordplay. He loved that all. He also loved his grandson, both grandsons, and was very good about getting down on the ground and playing with them. Or going out on the hot metal sticky slide at the lake and going down the slides with them. He went to the point of taking the pontoon boat, which, as you know, is a party barge, and essentially making it into a speedboat so that one of his grandsons could go tubing. Yes, yeah, not exactly made for that purpose. Although he was always right, he also made my mom very, very happy, and he went above and beyond in terms of Miriam and me and our kids in generosity, and also friends in terms of generosity. They've been very, very generous throughout most of my conscious life. With vacations, dinners, help with houses, helps with cars, helps with children's needs, tutors, etc. While he may not have been as socially gifted at the start of his relationship with my mom, he really sort of jumped in with both feet. I do want to go back to the University of Chicago and also Stanford and the colleges he went to. At one point, Jim was being interviewed because the Unabomber went to some of the same schools that Jim went to. And the Unabomber, Jim's comment on that was that essentially the Unabomber was at the same places at the same times, but was the only person who was more socially inept than he was at that point. Yeah. So my mom and he had a very good relationship because she really was able to get him out of his shell, make him live in ways that he probably would not have otherwise. And he made her very happy. He made her very content, and I think really was a rock for her. And we'll miss him.
Although I think we have some of those pictures from his Unabomber days. Lois wouldn't let us pry those wedding pictures with the maxi dresses. She wouldn't let us pry those out of her little hands. No. Anyone else would like to speak? Feel free. Here we go.
I'm Miriam, the other daughter. And Naomi and I did not consult beforehand in terms of what we wrote. So if there's any overlap, that's purely coincidental.
That's why I went there first.
Jim was my stepdad, a tried and true member of our family for over 40 years. When he married Lois, he took on 2 young daughters and treated us generously. That's a word that's been repeated a lot of times today. And with abundant energy and interest over the years. With his grandsons, Ben and Eli, he was willing to play seemingly endless hours of games and to share his prized puzzles. He would slide down every slide at the water park and show curiosity at each visit to the Children's Museum. He retained a boyish sense of play. I don't know if Jim had a fear of missing out, also known as FOMO in our contemporary world, but he might have, in a good way. With family activities and phone conversations, he always wanted to participate. He cared. Some of my fondest memories of growing up are family dinners. One night, Jim might cook a vindaloo. Another, Lois might make the Korean dumplings called mandu. At the dinner table, we talked about almost anything and everything. We also took the opportunity to be silly, to crack up at the phrase garneled goodies. I don't know the etymology of these words, but they translated roughly into nose and ear gook. Lois and Jim had a special parental sort of relationship with Annie Figueroa, one of Lois's students, and when Annie lived with us, the goofiness escalated. One night, Annie brought home a hat with dreadlocks attached to it, and I can picture it now. Jim with his white beard, wearing the hat and cavorting, all of us laughing so hard that some of us were in danger of wetting ourselves. Maybe that was a hint of Jim's future in theater. As you know, Jim devoted a lot of time, love, and energy in recent years to acting in or helping others put on plays. Eli, his grandson, was particularly impressed and entertained by Jim's role as the wise fool in Christmas Bells. Jim was a nerd before it was cool to be a nerd, or maybe he could be called a Renaissance man. His mind was open. While he studied and worked in math and computer science, he could sing Gilbert and Sullivan, dance English country dance, or Zumba. Like the rest of the family, he was also a pro at holding down couches while reading. Before Lois came along, I think Jim was more shy and retiring, but together they hosted over the years hundreds, if not thousands, of social gatherings. Lois brought out this entertaining side of Jim, and Jim proved to be her best husband ever. Generosity, smarts, wittiness, playfulness, a sense of fairness, and an ethical approach to life. Jim embodied all of these qualities and more.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come up? We'll move this on.
Hey guys. I don't really have much prepared, but I just want to talk a little bit about Jim, my grandpa. I know that Mom and Aunt Mimi talked a lot about his generosity, and I feel like he lived his life not for himself, but for others and trying to make other people happy. And I think my first vivid memories of Grandpa were at the beach in South Haven, when he would always take me out to the waves. We would walk down from our hotel that we were staying at, and we would go and wade out into the water and sort of fight with the waves. And regardless of if he wanted to do it or not, he would do it, and we would do it like 2 or 3 times a day, and it was really fun. And and I guess getting later in life, I know that I know that Mom said that Jim wasn't as adventurous at first, wasn't as socially, I guess, great as he was intellectually. But one thing that I know about him is that he was a great learner, and that getting later on in life, he was very, very adventurous. And I remember when we went on a big road trip the summer between 7th and 8th grade for me, and we went to Montreal, and he said, maybe it would be a great idea if we went on the river rafting, the St. Lawrence Rapids. And Grandma was like, oh, I don't know if we should do that. But I was really excited about it. He was really excited about it. And so we did it. And I remember it was just walls of water. And Grandma was like, but he was sitting there the whole time with a smile on his face. And he would really always find the best in situations. And I guess that's what I'll remember about. Thanks.
You all should have brought pictures. I mostly remember it. Anyone else care to join us?
Hi. I wanted to say a few things. Jim and Lois were very gracious to me and allowed me to stay with them a few months. That was a really good time. I had just been divorced, or was getting divorced, and had to move out. So they put me up for a few months while I found a place, and they guaranteed money for the house I was to get, so that I could make a bid on it. So that was very kind of them. And I also wanted to point out just another instance that they had the lake house, and they got the lake house, and one of the first things they did was invite the PTD friends and family to go out there and stay. So every summer we stayed there or many of us stayed there for a week or came and left, and it was a wonderful experience. Excuse me. I felt a kinship with Jim because I think we had some similarities, and I think Jim found some kind of ecstasy in figuring things out, and I also feel that way when I figure something out, and I noticed we both are not don't understand why when we figure it out why it's not immediately apparent to everyone else. And maybe don't communicate, don't realize we're not communicating what we figured out that well. And I noticed in the last year or so, just Jim getting less resilient, and I noticed coming, he would help on the set, build the set, and just not having as much energy. So it was kind of worrisome. But I think I recognized that it was hard on him because and that he was trying to figure it out, what was going on with him. And he did luminosity on the internet. He worked on it. So it must have been very hard for him. So I guess we didn't, have that much. I don't know, like we didn't communicate that much with each other, except being with each other and being with each other's presence and being good with that, and just having kind of a knowing that we had. That was great. And being enraptured with the same woman. But I guess when Jim was in the hospital, the moment that touched me the most, when he was going through a lot of stuff, and rather than being turned away, and I heard he was a little coached on this by Lois, but he made it a point to make me pay attention to him and look me in the eyes and to say, I really appreciate you being here. And he wasn't emotional like me at that time, but he was very sincere. And that sincerity and that peaceful, knowing presence is what I'll remember.
Where do we go from there? No, while Joe was talking, I was thinking about the lake house and how many years PTG went out there for retreats and the pontoon rides and just the days at Portage Lake were very special. And I also was thinking that we've rented a cottage for this summer, and I'm sure there'll be lots of talking amongst us about Jim, raising glasses and toasting them and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing we'll have to do is have to play all known games, because no one can explain how to play a game like Jim. I still don't understand how to play Quidditch, but but we'll get by. Anyone else would like to speak? Okay, I see one.
I would just like to pay tribute to Jim's sense of humor. Because he had a wonderful sense of humor, and sense of humor means that, you don't care if you seem ridiculous. Because you often are the source of the humor. And, the time that Jim broke his toe just really with me, because he broke his toe kicking Lois in the head. And he truly understood the human ridiculousness of this. And he told us about it, enjoying it. I mean, there was a very good reason why this happened. It had to do with inattention and being on the floor doing exercises and stuff like that. But anyhow, he enjoyed telling people about this because he knew it was funny, and he didn't mind appearing ridiculous. And I could just see him going to the doctor and say, yeah, I broke my toe, and the doctor would say, well, why did you break your toe? And he would explain that he kicked his wife in the head. And he would just enjoy seeing the doctor. So anyhow, it's his sense of humor that I wanted to pay tribute to.
Okay, last call.
My name is Mary, and I'm part of Jim and Lois's theater family. And the generosity of Jim and Lois is what I want to touch on. In January, I was in a car accident. I was on my way. It was a blizzard. This is Michigan. And it was out in Ann Arbor. It was a long drive, and a little voice kept saying, don't go. Just call and say you're not coming. But I was the chair of the committee, so I just felt like I had to go. So I'm heading out there, and I'm on Michigan Avenue, and I get cut off, spinning and twirling and sliding, and I slammed into a fire hydrant of all things. So I called to tell the group I'm not going to make it. 3 hours later, I'm still sitting on top of the fire hydrant in the truck, feeling very alone and very neglected and it was a traumatic experience, and my phone rang, and it was Jim. And Jim and Lois were going through a lot at that time. And I said, you know, Jim, I'm still sitting on top of the fire hydrant. And he said, that's not why I'm calling. Lois isn't going to be driving, so I want to offer you her car to use while they're fixing your truck. And in that moment, I felt so loved and so cared for, and I knew everything was going to be okay then. So I just wanted to pay tribute to Jim's reaching out and giving love to those who don't feel that they have any. And I love you, Lois. And I just want to say how honored I feel that Jim reached out to me, and I know he loved me. So I feel blessed to have known him and to be cared about by him. And I'll miss him.
Yeah, that's what gets some of us up here. Last call. Piggybacking on many people's, I wanted to just, a story that I remembered for myself personally with Jim that, well, I tend to have a very tender ego, and anyone that knows me, oh, what, they didn't say hello? So when I was so surprised when I first, I know Jim from the theater company, so about 13 years ago when I was getting involved in the theater company, sometimes you walk into a room, and they'd be, doing the set or rehearsing or, they were involved. And I would be so hurt if people didn't stop and say hello to me when I walked in the room. Well, the story's not really about me, but that'll help you appreciate that. So one time I was out at the lake and I was walking, I think, with Lois and Jim and a few others. And I just happened in one of those moments of confession, I shared that story. That hurt. And from that time on, every time I walked into the room, Jim made sure to say hello to me. And the things that it touched me was that it showed what a great listener he was and what a great part he had to include me in that way. So I will miss his great heart.
It's not really last call, it's just getting to happy hour. Anybody else?
I'm another one of Jim's friends from his professional life at Fame. I've known him since he joined Fame in 1982. And the remarkable thing, most of you apparently are his theatrical family, and you understand that Jim is smart, you don't realize how smart. The company that we started, it started with about 8 or 9 people. Almost all of them came from ADP Network Services or this company called Economist. The guy who started the company, Larry Rasty, was a brilliant man. An odd character, but a brilliant man. And the most brilliant thing he did was he reached outside of ADP, went back to a person he knew at Chase Bank, and brought Jim Dowling into the company. Jim did a fabulous job in architecting the Fame software. Other people here made important contributions, major contributions, but understand that software ages worse than dogs. It ages about 7 years for every calendar year. by that measure, Fame is over 210 years old, and it's still doing really well. Jim understood he was brilliant, and as someone said, didn't always realize you didn't come to the same conclusions quite as quickly as he did. But he never, ever made you feel bad about not being as smart as he was. He'd just stay with you until you caught on, until you figured out what he was talking about. Jim also is an interesting character around the office. Sometimes deliberately amusing, sometimes accidentally. He had a habit of, he would always carry coffee with him when he was walking around. Now, he's not like Wally and Dilbert, the guy whose only job is to carry coffee. Jim would be walking around with coffee, and he did something that Dick Weil would describe as vacillambulation. He'd start off in one direction, think of something, switch directions, and you could tell where he'd been by the coffee spots in the office. A lot of us have really bad handwriting, and I'm sure Jim did, but he also had awful printing. I had one time a page of notes. I was working on documentation then, and he'd written in very large letters, so it should have been really clear what he was saying. I believe he was writing about data buffers, but looking at it, it actually looked like it said data butlers. And I thought, that's a really charming thing to have in the software. I kind of wish that's what we called it. Anyway, it's awfully hard for us to acknowledge that Jim is gone. I've talked to other friends since then. I asked people. Initially, Lois had asked me to present some words, and I said, geez, I don't know. And one of my friends said, I can't believe he's not coming back, as I'm still looking forward to lunch next week. But what Richard had to say was, while everyone else was building Model Ts, Jim was designing a Ferrari when he built Big. He was that good.
I love it, all the actors up here, and the best pantomime of the day was...
Okay, do you like theater?
Anyone else like to say a few words? Okay.
I'm Alice, and I am a part of PTD. So Jim was like a part of my family, and I was a part of his family. And I've known him for many years, acted with him, partied with him, spent wonderful times at the lake with him, and have all those wonderful memories. While he was sick and in the hospital, I was in Arizona with my daughter who had just given birth. And although through the wonders of technology I was able to keep up with all the news about Jim's illness and progress or lack thereof via the internet, it broke my heart that I couldn't be there to be part of this last part of his life, and to also be a support to Lois and the rest of the PTD family. And I was really torn between wanting to hop on a plane and come home and staying out in Arizona with my daughter and my new grandchild. And I did a lot of thinking during that time about life and death. And one of the things, of course, I will always remember Jim for all the wonderful times we had together. But I will also remember him for this coinciding of his passing with the coming into the world of my grandson, and be reminded, because of Jim's passing at that moment, that life is a circle and that that's the way it's supposed to be. I'll miss you, Jim, and goodbye now.